For a while now, I've had a Google alert set up for the word homeschooling. That means that most days I get an email with a list of stories about homeschooling that have recently been published. And I've noticed and been kind of frustrated by the fact that most of these stories portray homeschooling in a really positive light. As I read Milton Gaither's book, Homeschool and American History, I've learned that this isn't anything new. Gaither gives examples from the early 1980s and from the late 1990s of the overwhelming majority of press coverage of homeschooling being positive. The problem with this is that homeschooling isn't always positive. I experienced some pretty extreme isolation and indoctrination, and I'm definitely not alone in that. It's pretty common. And then in the worst case, homeschooled children are severely abused and neglected, and sometimes even killed by their parents. These children's voices and their stories aren't being heard, and these children aren't being protected. Which is why today, April 30th, is the first annual Day of the Homeschooled Child. This is meant to be a day to raise awareness of how homeschool laws need to be changed and to honor the lives of these children who have been harmed by homeschooling. So let's look at just a couple of ways that the law is failing homeschooled students. In 48 states, including my state, my home state of Missouri, it's legal for registered sex offenders and convicted child abusers to homeschool their children with no restrictions. No one checks to see that their children are okay. And in 11 states, again including Missouri, parents aren't required to even notify school officials or anyone else that they're going to homeschool their kids. I was homeschooled in Missouri from 1986 to 1999. And in that time, no one ever checked to find out if I was actually receiving any education at all. And no one ever checked to find out if I was physically okay. The scary thing is that this was not a failure of the system. This is exactly how the system was set up to work. In upcoming videos, I'm going to be sharing more about my negative experiences with homeschooling. But today I want to share another story with you because it really clearly shows how desperately homeschool laws need to be changed. So here goes, and this is where the content warning for child abuse comes in. Around 2012, a couple named Mark and Melissa McGregor adopted twin girls from Bulgaria. The girls were about 7 years old at that point. And while the family was living in Washington State, a child abuse investigation was opened into the McGregors. But this investigation was never completed because they just left the state. And they ended up in Missouri, where they homeschooled their children. So they had the twin girls from Bulgaria, and they also had 8 biological children. Neighbors later said that they very rarely had any interactions with the McGregor family. Almost the only time that they even saw the family was when they were driving to or from home in their van. But one day in 2019, a neighbor saw one of the adopted twin girls, now 14 years old, walking barefoot down the road. This girl was really skinny. She was dirty. She had fresh welts on her arms, and she was bleeding from the bottoms of her feet. She told this neighbor that she hadn't had anything to eat for several days. So the neighbor invites her in, gives her some food, and calls the police. And at the McGregor's home, the police found the girl's twin sister, who weighed 76 pounds and had a distended stomach because of malnutrition. The girls had been sharing a room with a concrete floor that had nothing in it except for a small bed and a couple of small tubs with old clothes. The girls explained that they were sometimes allowed to sleep with pillows as a reward for good behavior. They also told the investigators that food was kept locked away from them, that they would be locked in a room for hours at a time, that they were hit with spoons and spatulas, and that they were punished by being forced to stand outside in the cold or to run barefoot down a gravel road. Things that they were punished for included not asking permission before they took a shower, got dressed, wore shoes, or read their Bibles. The story breaks my heart. The story is horrifying. But I could tell you so many more stories from Missouri and from all over the country that are even worse. Stories where homeschooling parents tortured their children to death. And the thing that these stories have in common is that it was these very lax homeschool laws that allowed the atrocities to happen so easily with no one noticing. We as a society have a responsibility to change this. We have to make homeschool safe. And if you would like to help, there are several things you can do. Today, on April 30th, you can take a selfie while wearing green and post it on social media with the hashtag Day of the Homeschooled Child. Green is to symbolize youth and the vibrant lives that homeschooled children should be able to lead. And if you want more information or graphics that you can share, you can find all of that at dayofthehomeschooled.child.org. Any day of the year, you can go to the Coalition for Responsible Home Education's website, which is responsiblehomeschooling.org, and sign their Bill of Rights for Homeschooled Children. And while you're at it, consider donating to them because CRHE is doing really good, really important work. If you were homeschooled, you can also share your story with CRHE, and they'll share it online, and you can do that anonymously if you want to. And if you would like to do some more reading, to understand more about homeschooling, the children's rights activist Ryan Stollar, who was one of the co-founders of Homeschoolers Anonymous, has put together a really nice recommended reading list on Twitter. So I'll put a link to that in the description box, as well as all the other links. So thanks for watching, and let's do this. Let's make homeschool safe.